Kids, kids, kids. What's the matter with kids today? It's the common lament of parents and others trying to make sense of the rising generation. Certainly they're different than we were. The world itself is vastly different from what it was even 5 years ago. But are young people any better or worse than their critics were when they were young? And what about the church? Is it losing its appeal for young people? Will the church die out simply from old age? These young people are gathered in Halifax at a national church-sponsored youth conference. During this program, you'll see their exuberance and sense something of their serious concern for life. With me in the studio are three youth leaders, Alison Gear, and Tricia Dixon. Together, we face the fact that today's youth are going to have to be tomorrow's church.
Hi, I'm Rob Booth, and welcome to another Presbyterian program. People sitting around me are all more active than I am right now in young people's work, although in my day I was a High C counselor. Does High C still exist in the churches that you're part of, or is that?
No.
Why not? It was a good program. Oh. And I know I floored you all by talking about YPU, which you all say, what was that? YPU, for your information, was the Young People's Union. It was really big. I mean, like everybody in my crowd belonged to the YPU. And we ran our own show, really. We didn't have to go to church court meetings because YPU, we had our own parliaments, all that sort of thing. So that my experience of young people's work was really that's what you went to after you finished Sunday school. And it was where I met girls. And where
that
all my...
hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed? Yeah, well, so what's your experience? Ken, let's go with you. What was your experience of youth work in the church, or how did you come to it?
Well, I think it sort of started... like you say, from Sunday school, there seemed to be a space almost after the Sunday school program where there wasn't, if it was offered, it wasn't really attractive to a lot of people. And then it got into a lot of people wanting to get together and organize something among themselves. Mostly, I think it started for social purposes, getting together for a volleyball game or to sing some music.
A group of you got together and decided to do something.
Well, it seemed to start that way. I think there wasn't the tight organization as there was before. Let's say, I'm not familiar with your experience, but it didn't seem to appear to have.
How about you, Alison?
I went through Sunday school, finished Sunday school, and then there was nothing at all, so I started teaching Sunday school. Then I went to a youth conference at Naramata about 4 years ago, and that really opened my eyes. I didn't even know that youth groups existed until then. And I came back and there were a few young people at our church, so I started leading that group. And from there I went to Presbyterian now conference, working with youth.
And then you went to the Youth Forum of General Council together too,
yeah.
which we're going to have some footage of. So you've gone that route. How about you, Trish? Where did you come into?
Well, as a teenager, my church involvement was fairly extensive with regard to Sunday school, CGIT, Canadian Girls in Training, junior choir. So in my day, the church setting played a fairly major role in what I did with my time, other than school or at home. So at this present time, I'm a youth leader, and really enjoying the opportunity to possibly give back some of the influencing and good times that I associated in my teen years in being connected with the church and that environment.
So what I hear from you, as for both of us, maybe part of a generation ahead of the two of you, that there was a youth group there, and that was the expected thing to go to, and for neither of you was that the case.
No.
Is that a change that's happened in youth work in the mainline churches, do you think? Have any of them got an ongoing established youth program that you know of, Alison?
I think the United Church does now. I think youth is becoming a lot more well-known in the United Church. A lot more churches are getting youth groups. Same with the Anglican Church. They have a very strong youth movement too.
The charismatic movement and the evangelistic movements are very attractive, and they're just a great organization, and I would guess a similar structure to maybe what you've experienced, but some of that is lacking in some of the work that Alison and I are both involved in.
You said there were a few of you in your church.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sort of the exceptions in the young people growing up in the Dunbar area where you live?
I think so, yeah. Not very many people go to youth groups.
That'd be your case too, Ken?
I think so, yeah.
How about in South Arm, though? Like, you're out in a suburban community in Richmond. Is it the in thing to be part of the youth group, or have you got the odds and sods, the ones who aren't part of a pack running someplace?
Well, boy, if my youth group's watching.
You're not going to call them odds and bods, all right.
No. I've been involved in the past couple of years with the South Arm Youth Group, and I would say that majority of them are, take them out of that setting and put them within the school setting or the community, you wouldn't necessarily think that they were connected to a church group. And although we are affiliated with the church, I would say our main focus is kind of a gathering place for a group of people to be together, socializing, questioning, having fun together, and in that sense, an indirect way of fellowship, a way of being together. A lot of those young people, the age group are mainly 17 to 19 years of age. We do have two youth groups now within our church community, a junior secondary, and then also the one that I'm involved with would be considered a senior group.
What are the things, what are the needs, what are the problems that they're looking for in a church group? What are they looking for? Kent, what do you say?
They're looking for some things to do, some places to go, to meet people, and to share problems and common concerns of everyday life, the things that are getting them down, and problems they're having, say, with family and friends. There's a lot of that more of a need right now, I think, than even maybe a need to sit down and study the Bible, or there is a need to really communicate common problems and talk about them and be able to share experiences and so on.
Yeah, I want to push that one a bit with you, because I think that's probably different from when I was growing up in church, in that just the divorce statistics are so much different now than then, and it's not that long ago, eh?
No.
But do you find even in those 14-year-olds you've got a lot of kids that for whom family relationships are a major problem?
Definitely, yeah.
How do you go
There is.
about trying to meet those then in your group?
Just letting them talk about it, accepting them, letting them feel that they can talk about anything within the group and they don't feel inhibited by it because there's no one there that's going to put any pressure on them for anything.
Is there anybody in the group, though, who represents a parent figure? I mean, you're the leader.
Right?
Don't you sometimes feel kind of inadequate when they've got one of the kids in your group's got a problem with a 45-year-old father, other than your own problems with your 45-year-old father? How do you handle a thing like that? Do you bring other people in?
No, I haven't. I haven't felt a need to do that. Sometimes all they need is just to talk and to have someone to listen to, and that's what I try to do.
Do you find someone looking on you as a surrogate mother or whatever?
That's really hard to answer, Rod. A few weeks back, we had a program that basically focused on shaping our lives, starting internally, who am I, and gaining an awareness that you can shape the kind of life you want, the kind of person you want to become. And toward the end of the evening, I was quite surprised to discover that a lot of the youth in that evening, some of their concern, a lot of their major concern was with regard to what do I do when I'm in a peer situation and there's pressure put on me to conform? What do I do when this is my opinion in my home situation and my parents are coming from another direction? And so I found my role in that particular instance to be kind of a facilitator and a listener, definitely not a parent, which I am, a parent of 2 children. So I think because of my own experience, had some awareness of maybe both sides. And I think basically at that particular evening, they just needed to talk, and it really opened an area that I was unaware of. And some of that is with regard to step parenting, blended families, just an array. I think relationships in general, how to relate, communicating, just so many areas that I experience the kids as kind of questioning, either directly or indirectly, depending on the situation. And sometimes it just takes a bit of maneuvering to bring it to light. And then once the focus is in a certain area, they just come alive and volunteer all kinds of situations and problems.
All 3 of the youth leaders felt it important to help young people deal with peer group pressures and to discover that you don't just have to follow the pack, you can shape your own destiny.
We as people are shaped within history as well as shaping ourselves, and that was kind of the focus that I wanted to bring to the youth group.
So what are you trying to do? Help the kids in the group understand that they can take a role in shaping what
That's
they're going
right.
to be?
Yes, that we don't have to be a victim of circumstance, that we can, there are choices everywhere in life, and of course consequences, and kind of stressing both aspects of taking direction for your life and making your decisions and kind of approaching it creatively rather than doom and gloom, and the society we live in seems, to me, at times overwhelming.
How about peer group pressure? You touched on that. Do you think, Kent, that that is a more serious thing? Was it tougher for you to contend with growing up than you think it was for your dad, for instance?
I don't really think I can relate to a lot of times about my parents of how the pressure really affected them. I think that it has increased considerably in the way it affects the youth of today. In a lot of ways, I guess, it's harder to deal with. The pressures are greater, more complex, and it's just unrealistic sometimes to think about dealing with that sort of pressure. It really is.
At one point, though, in your life, I happen to know, you did sort of an outward bound program. It was a school you went to of one kind. How formative was that for you in getting hold of this ability to shape your own destiny, do you think?
I guess what it really did for me most of all was just sort of put me in the right perspective so that I could sort of view the way that I wanted to get a hold of shaping things. I guess that's a lot of times that's what the youth groups are offering is that that turning point, the point where you can actually get to the point where you can change your perspective on how you want to look at things and how you want to shape yourself.
My own denomination, like many others, organizes a great number of youth conferences, providing a forum for young people to sort out their beliefs and values. More than 100 young folk from right across the country gathered for the youth forum that accompanied our last General Council. Together with the Council Commissioners, the young people took a look at the Church's controversial study document on human sexuality.
How different are your sexual values then from those of your parents?
Like you said, we're very different because the media is always using lots of skin to advertise stuff like beauty stuff, anything like Coca-Cola or anything like that. So we're used to seeing a little more of it. Our parents aren't.
Our parents weren't affected by the media, like we are.
Not in the same way.
Because all TV and all that stuff.
But even they were affected more. They had different values than their parents.
True, yeah.
Wonder to see our kids.
Really?
Nor did they dodge such touchy but important issues as premarital sex.
I'd have to agree with what Bonnie said last night. As far as adolescents are concerned, premarital sex is not wise. There's too much damage that can be done psychologically and physically, and there's a lot of risks that are taken unnecessarily. And you could do a lot of things without engaging in premarital sex. I mean, among teenagers, but in premarital sex as a whole, I wouldn't totally categorically call it wrong for adults. I don't.
We're talking about adolescents.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, as far as adolescents are concerned, I think it's wrong.
Okay,
Taking it beyond there, I wouldn't say that it's categorically wrong.
After discussion groups with the adult commissioners, the youth forum gathered to compare reactions.
I was very surprised that almost all the adults there were very open and were very liberal. I mean, they might have disagreed with several of the points in the report, but I was surprised that, these people were as open as they were, and it shattered the little illusion that I had about the generation gap, which I think we tend to put ourselves a little ahead of our elders, but I don't think we're as far ahead as we may think we are. And that was just the one thing that struck me.
Yesterday you asked us to speak of the church's role in our own sexual experiences, what messages the church had given us in Sunday school, church, etc. I found that most people in my group, I think all of them, have had no vibrations as far as their own sexuality and sexual concerns in their church. And I think that says a lot to us in the negative aspect, telling us that church and sexuality don't really fit together. They're two separate things. And I think that, I would like to ask you, don't you think that the church should be the originator of all the discussion on this, to put our sexuality in a Christian perspective, not just the sex education we get in schools?
The one thing that I found is that I found lots of information in my school about sexuality, but I never learned to accept myself. My problem is when I was in high school, I was a skinny, scrawny, kid with lots of pimples, and I really didn't feel good about myself. My aunts used to say that if I turned sideways, I disappeared, or that if I stuck my tongue out, I looked like a zipper. This is what she told me. And I felt that I was the ugliest person that anybody would ever want to look at or to care about or to be. And it was only when I was at a church camp that I heard somebody preach about how God accepts us the way we are.
I sound like a hick little boy from Northern Ontario, but I didn't realize how much I didn't know about the whole subject. You know, I can remember back in grade 8 when we had sex education, some of us who were in the school band, we missed the sex ed for music class. One of them played our... We made music of another type upstairs. But I'd just like to say thanks, and you know, I hope that perhaps through discussing this report and its recommendations that we can open up something that perhaps has been closed in the past, and that this attitude we have about the church, you know, that everything it says about sex is thou shalt not, period, is going to change in the 1980s.
Sound pretty reasonable, don't they? More reasonable on the topic than some so-called adults I've had to deal with. The Youth Forum spent some time dealing with third world and global issues. I asked the panel how they deal with such topics in their own groups.
How about global realities? Does that enter the minds? Yours is a younger group that you're working with. Are they at all worried about the world they're going to go out into?
They're very much worried about it. I remember one night we were talking about the future, and they all said, "I'm scared to grow up. I don't know what's going to happen." You know, that's a concern that I think a lot of the youth have. They don't know what the world's going to be like, even 10 years from now. And that can be really scary for some of them, I think.
How do you help them deal with that?
I think making them feel good about who they are right now, and once they feel secure within themselves, I think they have more confidence to face their future.
When you were at the United Churches General Council's Youth Forum, did they wrestle away with the nature of the future?
We spent one morning workshop on that.
Having such a good time in the present that the future
Right.
was... Well, a psychiatric nurse that I knew one time indicated that the most vulnerable age group in her experience of people who had breakdown or contemplated suicide was in that late teens group. Just the group that you and your peers are in, where suddenly you've got to leave what you have been, and you're in the process of shaping, but shaping in the face of a very uncertain future. Where does religion come into then, helping people cope with that? I mean, sure, we can make them feel good about being who they are. We can let people know that they're accepted in a group, and that's important. I think that's... How about religion specifically?
I think there's a lot of people right now in the groups that we're involved that are really advocating and really wanting a little bit of, or not a little bit, actually quite a bit of change in the way things they experience the church right now. And these are the people that really care about the church. They're maybe speaking out against some of the things that are going on, but it's because there's a deep concern and love for the church there.
Kent's feelings were echoed by some of those young people you just met at the Youth Forum.
I think it's an unfortunate thing, but many young people have this misconception of the church as a very dead institution where, let's say, elderly people go to. They don't really realize that it's a very lively and a very enthusiastic institution that can offer them a lot if they're willing to take the time and the chance to really give it a chance and let it do wonders for them.
One of the greatest spaces of the church that young people see is the actual church service, and I find that a lot of the services can be quite stagnant, and youth are used to life in everything they do, and I think if we could all join in together and really realizing the vividness that could be in a church service itself, we'd have a lot more interest by the youth in what is going on in the church.
I put the question about church services to my local panel of experts.
How about church services? Do they feel part of those? Like, I remember when I was in East Trail with my High C group, if I may revert to ancient history here in a moment. But seriously, the evening service, my heavens, evening services yet, but that's what all the young people came to. And we had the High C group afterwards. And I would say that we had a group of 30, 40, and it's not a big city. But I'm not sure how much those worship services meant to them now. When you're giving the service, you can't tell. But do the young people that you work with find the average worship service meaningful to them?
I think there are parts that are, but often there's parts that aren't, and they're striving for something that that they can relate to more easily some of the traditional things that they don't really agree with, not necessarily agree with, they really can't find anything for themselves in it. I know our youth group particularly really enjoy putting on a service, and a lot of time and effort goes into it. We try to explore different mediums, maybe using slides and music, and just to try and get something that really represents how we feel about worship and what we like to do without really, being extremely radical and how we want a good blend. It's hard to...
The key, as much as anything, might be the ownership they would have in it, because they designed it.
Yeah.
Our youth group did we've done 2 worship services in the past year, and the first one we did a similar kind of worship as you're speaking of, Kent, where you use different media. We used a slide presentation, we designed our own theme, and the kids all became involved at various levels in different ways, including one person who basically said he didn't believe in God. And so with that kind of dichotomy, we involved him with a reading, and then we had a counter response for those who felt differently. And I thought I felt really good about that. We were asked to do a Christmas Eve service at our church, and we really took it on a celebrative, festive note and celebrated the birthday of Jesus. And so I think in that respect, it is meaningful for our particular youth group when we became involved to that extent. And they could present themselves in a way that felt true to them and could identify with what's being said.
Is Bible study at all a thing on their agenda?
Not in the youth group I'm involved in, no. There are some youth groups I know of that do concentrate on that, but the one I'm involved in doesn't at all.
I think it's interesting you should raise that, Rod, because Bible study for me was always a very boring aspect of religion, or to my way of thinking, faith. And Alison and Kent and I were just talking about Naramata last October. We had a Youth BC Youth Conference. And the whole focus for that weekend was strictly religion. And to see 200 young people participating with excitement and reading their Bibles and sitting in smaller groups praying individually in the round and experiencing communion was a really new experience for me at this point in time. I had
new for a lot of them too.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. And I found that very exciting, and I think overall the tone of that particular weekend was very encouraging. The different ways, the role plays with regard to scriptures, discussions, song, excellent music, just really good tools to get at.
Because one of the things I feel as I look at my own children growing up that they don't have that I did, I suppose it's my fault, is just an awareness of the Bible stories, which you then have to build and shape your ideas around. They haven't got that particular cart to carry it in.
That's right.
Which I got in junior Sunday school is where I got it.
A lot of the time, Bible study is often raising questions and contradictions, and being able to realize that those are healthy contradictions, healthy questions to raise, and being able to deal with those and to really wrestle with those problems that even come up in the Bible. And I think a lot of that is happening in a lot of Bible groups. I know what you mean, though, about the stories and stuff in the Bible that aren't really coming out at all.
My only hope is that when they discover it later, it'll be fresh and new, and therefore it may have an impact that it didn't have for some of us who. One final thing I want to get into is the whole question of morality. I mean, are young people any different today than they ever were? What's your reading on it, Alison?
I think the media sort of says that they're different and they are experiencing a lot of different things, but basically I think their morals are pretty much the same as they always have been.
Alison and I were, again, sort of discussing this, and my experience, as Alison was saying, I would assume from what I read in statistics on venereal disease at a younger age and teenagers, abortion, et cetera, that, oh my, these teenagers are really starting at an earlier age, and my experience has been quite the contrary. And as I was thinking today about the program with regard to that question, I really started to question whether or not teens are all that different than I was 20 years ago. I really kind of hunch not in some respects.
I hunch the same fears are there, the same yearnings are there, the same instincts are there, the same kind of internal restraints, if not external restraints, are still there. I was intrigued at the youth forum to find an awful lot of the young people saying their church hadn't really helped them get hold of their sexuality very much.
No, most people said that.
I don't think my church helped me. I don't know, how about you, Ken?
I don't think my church helped me specifically. However, the people involved in the leadership role. Certainly did, and I know last year our youth group had a sexuality weekend, which may sound very
Oh, yeah, what are those? Yeah.
apprehensive and oh my goodness, but it was one of the best weekends as a community that we had together, and the guys dealt with separate issues, the girls dealt with separate issues, we dealt with issues together, and really it wasn't a sexual experience, it was a learning of your total
In community,
sexuality.
that's great, eh?
Yes.
It's that kind of youth and adults together tackling the issues of life that holds the most hope for both church and youth tomorrow. For, as many of the young people at the Youth Forum tried to point out, kids and adults aren't really that different.
A lot of the time, adults seem to think that because society is doing a lot of things that young people are, in general, agreeing with those, and young people in the church aren't. We really aren't. We really have a lot of the same views that they do.
I don't think there aren't very many young people in the church today because of the fact that the type of services and the type of format the church has aren't particularly conducive to young people's feelings and things. I think if you want more young people in the church, I think we're going to have to change the menu at the table.
One of the things that we haven't, things that have happened in a youth group that I think has changed from your age, which is really helping the whole idea of the morality questions, is the fact that the programs are usually planned, but one thing that Tricia and I have had a lot of experiences is flexibility in that program.
Lived moments.
Lived moments and letting things happen and dealing with those lived moments. But really realizing that the real interaction and the real communication between the kids is quite often after the meeting's over, you know. Quite often, one thing I think it was Jim Fraser, he said, youth group meetings are only an excuse to get people together so they can talk after the meeting on the way home.
Used to be driving everybody home in my father's old Oldsmobile where it all really came together. Yeah, we packed 11 or 12 of them in.
That's right.
Good thing the police didn't catch us. We're out of time. Thank you, all three of you, for sharing with us. And thank you for being with us on Pressure Point. We'll see you next week. Good night.
The young people are very important. Without young people, the church wouldn't be going very far.